Hey YouTube, welcome back. It's been about a month and a half since we started playing Bazaar, and it's a wonderful time. Been enjoying it a lot. We're solidly legend rank. We have fun playing basically only Dooley because he's wonderful. We played him before he was meta, but we also enjoy him now that he is meta. So we're the bad guy and the good guy in that way. We are rank 692, and we have a very good time playing the game on twitch.tv/PerryThePig. We have been compiling a list of things like some thoughts about the game, how it's been working. We've done this for other games, like specifically at Last Epoch in the past, talking about like the meta builds, talking about game balance, giving feedback to developers about what things we do and don't like about the game. And basically, I'm only playing Dooley at this point because I'm a Dooley appreciator, and I wanted to take some time to talk to you, the players, and also perhaps to the developers, if this video reaches them, about things that I do and don't like about the current patch. This is specifically about Dooley. I lose to a couple builds when it comes to Vanessa. I lose to a couple builds when it comes to, what's his name? Pygmalion as well. And I've got a pretty good feel for when my build is high rolling, when I'm gonna like lose, when it's a toss up, and how I might want to like change my build based on what my opponent, what hero my opponent's playing. What I'm trying to say is, I'm not bad at this game. We got a good idea what's going on, and I want to give feedback. So the very first thing that I want to touch on is like kind of a general complaint, and this is something that's being more the case as I get better at the game and like I know what I'm doing. But it's also something that really started on the current patch in the Bazaar, where they eliminated the chance to re-roll on large vendors. So for those of you who don't know, there's you used to be able to re-roll all vendors to see, you know, 2 options or 2 pages instead of just 1 page. But the recent patch, Reynad wanted us to not be able to force large items as much. And the reason for that, in one way, is there's fewer large items in the large item pool. So imagine if there's only 6 items and there's 3 of them on one page and 3 of them on the other page. As soon as you see the large item vendor, you knew in the past, before it got fixed, you knew exactly, hey, I can go there and get the large item that I need for my build, and I can force something. And Reynad seems to be of the opinion that he doesn't want you to force things, which you may or may not agree with him on it, but that's his opinion on that. So here's my complaint on it. This is the very first thing on my list of Notepad on the second monitor here. I don't have many things to spend money on because I'm not gambling nearly as much. Having a sells frozen or sells freeze items vendor, you only see three items, and they might just be garbage items. But if there's 2 pages, then I always click on that vendor when it comes up, and I re-roll from the first page to the second page, looking for some spicy freeze items to incorporate in my build. And that's kind of with large items as well. Like if I want, you know, a combat core for my Dooley build, I'm gonna click on large vendor, and I'll roll, and that costs 3 gold every time that I roll for that. And now that sells enchanted items, I made a list, but I think sells enchanted items you can re-roll. I think you can re-roll it. But like sells tools, sells friends, sells large items, sells X, Y, and Z, like all those like specific vendors for things that they sell. I basically don't click on those anymore, because it only allows me to see 3 items, and the chance that I'm going to get something good is very low. So I'm much more likely to click on something that says, you know, get a temporary boost for my build so I can win the next round, or get gold, or get 300 flat life, or get a free random item. I'm much more likely to click on those things because I know that even if I get a free item, I can at least sell it and generate more money so that when something does come around, I get it. So that's frustrating. I very often end up with 50, 100, even 150 gold. In the past, I had things to sell them, or had things to roll, or had shops to roll, and like every time that I re-rolled, it consumed money. But I don't have that anymore. So I'd like to look for more things to spend money on. There, that's point 1. Let's move on. The large item re-roll, it might be fine not being able to re-roll large items, but there's definitely other things that you could do instead for not being able to re-roll large items. Because the issue is, at low levels, you could only have like, you know, 5, 6, 7 large items, and if you re-roll, you're practically guaranteed to get the item that you want. What you could do is, instead, for the large item vendor, Pole is his name, say that you can reroll after day X, like after day 4, after day 5, or maybe after day 7, you're allowed to reroll your large vendors. Because I have so much money, I want to be able to find the item to push my build or to find a direction from my build. Let me do that after day X. The other option would be like, allow for a reroll after gold tier items start being offered. And I think gold tier items start being offered on day 5, so maybe that lines up in the same place. But that's something that I'd be interested in having reintroduced to the game. Like, if I have more money, let me reroll after a certain point in time. Another one is this is like a little bit more specific, so we'll jump into like a very specific thing, and then we'll jump back into more broad stuff after that. Taking a look at the different cores that exist in the game. So Dooley has this mechanic where like you have a core, and then it determines what your start's going to look like, basically. So let's take a look at the core, advanced filters, Dooley. We're looking at howbazaar.gg. It's a great website. So search name only. So there's armored core. Combat core is a purchasable, it's a large item. But there's companion, critical, ignition, the core, which really needs a different name because we all just call it default core. And then weaponized core. Weaponized core and crit core are definitely the worst in the current meta. They don't do much at all. Technically, there's things that you can do, but they're really niche compared to the other things. Crit core scales really highly, and crit core does have a unique mechanic to it, where if you want crit, you put it on one side. If you don't want crit, you put it on the other side. If you can double proc the core by having an item on the left side that crits, and that's an interesting, distinct dynamic for it. Weaponized core, on the other hand, I think is worth a shout out as something that is really middling. You can do a proboscis build. You could play flamethrower. Weaponized core is way worse than anything else, and it also doesn't have that interesting dynamic to it that the crit core does, where it can like be double procced depending on how well you're scaling your build. Other things you could do with weaponized core is have it not have the exact same damage as the default core. That could be interesting. You could have it proc off of any weapon. So like maybe when you use a weapon, charge this 1 second. So instead of like when you use any item to the left, it's any weapon, but it could be left or right. Maybe that's a direction for it as well. But something with weaponized core, it's definitely missing spice. Like crit core is not good in my opinion, but at least it has spice. At least it has something else interesting going on there. So I like that crit core has the unique identity of like double procking, but I wish that the payoffs were a little bit better, or like the synergy pieces were a little bit better for it. And this kind of goes into my next topic that I'm about to talk about in 20 seconds. And that is, we don't have good synergy for the crit core. Something like the motherboard is very interesting. Something like the cooling fan is very interesting. These things support and put damage and critical strike chance onto the core so that it can be a primary source of damage, with or without being a double core build using a combat core. So I like things like motherboard and cooling fan, but I wish they were like a tiny bit better. Motherboard is actually better than it looks right now because it procs off of any item giving haste, not just the core gaining haste. So it's bugged, or the text is wrong, or the text is wrong and it's bugged. But it should be fixed and then maybe made better. So I like the idea there, but it's not quite strong enough yet. The thing that I was going to mention, we're 20 seconds in the future now, is the self-burn package. And one of the things I was really excited for with the recent patch is that self-burn got a buff with pyrocarbon. And pyrocarbon's a really cool item. It says like when you burn, you haste all of your items for X number of seconds. And it's really, really cool. Unfortunately, it's a medium item, and it also requires you to burn yourself. So it's kind of a large item because you got to burn yourself and you got to have the pyrocarbon in your build. And oftentimes, when I was trying to force pyrocarbon into my build, I found myself just feeling as though Solar Farm is better. So Solar Farm also received a substantial buff in playability and synergy on this current patch, and it's great. It's definitely not OP, but it's good. It serves a good role. I like it. It's the appropriate size. It shouldn't be a medium, like it's a good large. But pyrocarbon is like not quite there yet. Maybe pyrocarbon needs more text on it. I like that it's not a large item. I think if you made it large, it would compete too much with Solar Farm. But as a medium, it doesn't quite do much by itself. As a small, it's probably OP. So maybe just like keep it as a medium, but like it needs something extra to it. So the self-burn package is cool. It's thematic. It's interesting. It makes your brain start ticking. but it's not quite there yet, and no one plays it. So it needs more support, in my opinion. I would not delete the self-burn stuff. I would just buff the self-burn stuff because it's cool. I like cool stuff. Next up, it's kind of a rehash of something we talked about previously, but like the sells tools, for example, like sells large items, like the no re-rolling there. To me, it's boring. It causes the player just not to click on them. You really get in a situation where like, do I want to look at 3 tools? Or do I want to just take 200 flat life? And you'd probably rather just take 200 flat life and just, you know, work with the items that you got right now. So it causes that gold issue that we were talking about previously. So what you could do is either increase, this is like some potential ideas for it, is you could increase the density dramatically of enchanted items. Probably not the right place to go, but finding a random enchanted item in one of your shops, to me, is one of the most exciting things in all of the Bazaar, because it makes you pivot into what the game is currently offering you. And finding like a cool synergy item, like that's good. You know, I like finding synergy items. I like building around synergies that exist in the game. But when you find like a race Carl with icy on it, like an icy race Carl that freezes stuff, you're like, oh man, this item's completely insane, but I do not have enough haste in my build to merit this icy race Carl. But I'm gonna buy it, and I'm gonna start picking up a bunch of sources of haste so that I can make use of this thing. Finding a random enchanted item is the most exciting part of any of the runs that I get to do. And I would like to perhaps increase that. I don't know how you do it, but I'd like to increase it because it's great. More realistically, just re-allow re-rolling on those like sell item vendors. But let's move on to the next bullet point that I've got written here. And that is the meta. The meta of the game right now is skewed towards like ailments. You can get, you know, damage, of course, and you can get sharpening tools. And the sharpening tools, as a loot reward when you level up, they put a good amount of damage, or they put some shield onto your duct tape, and they make you, you know, stronger. Unfortunately, the poison and the burn is just busted. So there's a lot of different moving pieces that contribute to what the meta is right now. And the meta is, like, to me, you know, largely dominated by Dooley, right? So there's Dooley, there's so Pig got nerfed, Vanessa got nerfed, sure. Dooley, all of the rays got reduced down to bronze tier, so you can pick them up very, very easily, especially on day 1 or day 2 if you get a sells non-weapon shop or a sells small item shop. It's very easy to get the ball rolling with those rays, and those rays work very well with burn and with poison. And of course, when you get more burn and poison from those level up rewards, those scraps, it just steamrolls the whole thing. Like, your build's insane. So it makes it hard to abandon items once you use the scrap on one of your items. And that's something specifically that, you know, Reynad and the developers just removed from the game, because they just took those skills like iron sharpen iron as a Vanessa skill, and they said, okay, well, we recognize that this makes it hard to pivot off of an item, so we're going to make it like a static bonus that goes to your items from the skill bar. But that same exact issue is now present in the level of rewards of putting burn on your stuff. So that contributes to what the current meta is, and it goes against something that Tempo Storm, whatever they're called, doesn't want to be the case. So just keep that in mind, right? Gold scrap might be appearing too early. I know the scrap upgrades happen on days 4 and day 7, where those ticks are on your calendar bar, whatever that's called, for getting your 10 wins. So 4 and 7 is where they get upgraded, but like 7 might be too early, right? Like maybe it could be like day 8, day 9, maybe even day 10. Where like if you get to day 10 and you don't have your 10 wins yet, then you can start getting even bigger bonuses because you need to close the game out eventually, right? So maybe the gold scrap appears too early. The next bullet point that I have here before I move on to like specific Dooley items is freeze. And this is so obvious. This is like everybody on Reddit gets to talk about this as well. And Reddit is the very first place you go to complain about something. So Reddit is useful to game developers. It's useful to learn what the meta is for a video game, but you have to bear in mind that a lot of people go to Reddit when they are mad, and they don't really go to Reddit when they're happy. So just bear that in mind, of course. So freeze is very frustrating when it happens, because it probably causes you to lose, quite frankly, but it prevents you from taking game actions. So I'm someone who's like, you know, I've played a lot of Magic the Gathering, and I played blue decks. Um, and I like to play, you know, action RPGs where I take a lot of game actions and I get to micro my character and cast a lot of spells, and I get to do things. Like when I play Magic the Gathering, I want to play Ponder and I want to play Preordain, and I don't want to cast a 2-drop on turn 2 and a 3-drop on turn 3 and a 4-drop on turn 4. I don't want to do that. I want to, in the realm of Magic the Gathering, cast 3 spells on turn 3. I want to cast 3 spells on turn 4. I want to cast 17 spells on turn 10, because that's what's exciting to me. I like to take game actions. And freeze is frustrating because when it happens, your board doesn't do anything, and it's not anything that you did wrong, but your pieces, your game actions, they simply don't happen. And I get the frustration because it frustrates me too. So we have a joke in Twitch chat. We say, see freeze, take freeze. And this applies specifically to skills, and it's by and large what you ought to be doing. There are some really exciting skills. There are enabling skills. There are skills that do really wacky and wild things. But if there's also one next to it that says the first time you haste freeze an item for 4 seconds, that's the one you take, because that's the right choice. And that's kind of boring, isn't it? Because it removes the decision-making process from you, and you just take the one that says freeze. And that's frustrating, because not only do you and your opponent not to take game actions, but you, when you're building your character, you don't get to make decisions, because you should just take the one that says freeze on it. So what could you do? Whatever you want, Reynad. But here's some options that we can brainstorm. You could say, cannot be frozen if frozen recently. You know, and recently could be 2, 3, 4 seconds, whatever. So maybe if an item gets frozen, as soon as it unfreezes, it has at least 2 seconds to do something. Could be an option. Another one would be like reduced efficacy against medium and against large items. Freezing a small item, not OP. Freezing a large item for 4, 5, 6 seconds completely wins you the game. So maybe you could have reduced efficacy against medium and against large. You could build that in the game somehow. Another option could be subsequent freezes are less effective. Currently, your freezes can stack on an item such that they never ever get unfrozen, which could be frustrating. So maybe that doesn't stack anymore. Or maybe each subsequent freeze is like 10 or 20% less effective, so that like eventually your item will unfreeze and, you know, be permanently unfrozen. What else could one do? From a game design perspective, I remember during the Q&A, Raynon said that he was interested in the community taking more of an active approach in the development of game cards, and he said that it would be interesting to talk about what is and is not good game design. So I like Dooley's scarf. I think Dooley's scarf is a cool item. It's like a stepping stone that you can buy for now, and then if you get a Radiant enchant later, you can drop it because you no longer need it because you have the Radiant enchant. So more items like Dooley's scarf is probably a good thing. I think it's a nice safety valve for something that could exist in the game. When I say safety valve, I think about something like Leech existing in the world of Marvel Snap, for those of you out there who play Marvel Snap. Leech was a safety valve against on reveals. It was a safety valve against opponents having turn 6 plays that really blew out your board and were super strong. But the safety valve itself ended up being too strong. So there's like an entire different conversation about what Leech was. But I digress. So having a safety valve that people can rely on if freeze gets too annoying, this is the kind of thing that Reynad and the developers would have access to, because they could see how many people are buying Dooley's scarf. How many people are buying these anti-freeze items? Are too many people buying these anti-freeze items? What's the opinion on Reddit? What's the opinion on Twitch chat? Like, if every single board needs to have a Dooley scarf in it, or a new item that's created to be similar to Dooley scarf, then maybe freeze is a problem. So just make those items more common. Those Dooley scarf items could be an option, and I don't hate that option. And the last option for like addressing freeze that we brainstormed was the bronze tier freeze skills are probably too good. We think a lot about bronze tier skills because we think about the old meta where at day 1, hour 1, you would start with a gold tier skill, and of course that's insane, and that's no longer the case. But we think about gold tier skills as opposed to like bronze skills. Maybe you should get a bronze skill on day 1. It's much less impactful than a gold skill, of course. But freezing something for 3, 4, 5 seconds is extraordinarily impactful for a bronze tier skill. What if the bronze tier skills varied between 1 to 2 seconds instead of varying between 3 to 4 to 5 seconds? that's something that it probably ought to be the case, because currently the bronze freeze skills are significantly more impactful than any other bronze skill in the game. The common recommendation for new players coming from me and from other content creators who are on Twitch is that you ought not to be taking bronze skills. You probably don't take any skill vendors before day 5 because they dilute your pool for later on, and those early skills just aren't very impactful, except for the freeze ones, which are of course very good. So this would also help address the see freeze, take freeze joke from earlier on. So the last couple things I want to talk about when it comes to like being a Dooley main, things that I'd like to see change in the future, or maybe just feedback, because we got good feedback too. Let's start with good feedback. I like a good compliment sandwich. And that is Raise Carl. Raise Carl got changed so that he charges whenever you haste, and he went from not really an item to definitely an item. I think the buff to Raise Carl, the adjustment to him, was wonderful. Even looking at things like Monitor Lizard versus Chem Snail, like they're very similar, but one of them's completely busted. Obviously, Lizard's gonna be changed at some point as well. But I really like Chem Snail. I like his design. It feels like a much more modern design. Like when you slow, he charges up. When he charges up, he can be activated. He scales off crit as well because it's an active ability. When he charges up and happens quickly, it means he charges up the core as well. And it just feels much more synergistic with what's going on in the world of Dooley's characters. Like I like Chem Snail, and I'm pretty guaranteed. I'm not worried about Monitor Lizard finding a home. I just, obviously needs to be adjusted a little bit. So Raise Carl and the adjustments to like things that used to have haste now getting charged up, like Bomb Squad, those were excellent changes. I'm a huge fan of them personally. But one last item that I wanted to talk about is an item that was totally OP for like 3 or 4 days and then basically got gutted, and that is Armadillo. So Armadillo, it used to be, it would shield and then deal damage based on how much it was shielded. And of course, all the synergistic skills like defensive stance and sharp corners just got nerfed as well, but then Armadillo also got nerfed. So all he does now, Armadillo, he does damage. And then when you shield, charge this too. It's boring. The best Armadillo build that I got was maybe as good as the pulse rifle that I put him in instead of. He's really not found a home, and that's unfortunate because I like Armadillo a lot. So when I think about what Armadillo could be, I look at similar items like Flamethrower, right? Flamethrower is a very impactful item. Not too many people use it. Some people are completely infatuated by it. But Flamethrower is an item that you put weapon damage on it, and it turns it into flame damage. I can't believe I just said flame damage out loud. It turns it into burn. So you put in weapon damage, you get burn out of it. And that's kind of like a black box. Like it converts this thing into that thing. And I love that idea. So what I personally wish Armadillo would be like shield X and then deal damage based on this item's shield amount. I think that'd be very fine. Like you could put shield scraps on it or scale the shield of the item, and then it would deal damage based off of that. That could be fine. The other option, of course, would be is that what it was before? In any case, what you could do is just make it the pre-nerf Armadillo, but just make it gold plus. So instead of being like a bronze tier or even a silver tier item, just make it a strong, distinct item that only appears, after day 5 when you start getting gold items instead. And like, we know that there's totally insane gold tier or even diamond tier items out there. Flamethrower is gold tier, for example. This Armadillo that we're talking about could be gold tier. Things like Pierre Conditioner, freezing items constantly. He's a diamond plus. Like, we're okay having strong items in the game. Like gold plus, diamond plus. This is something that you could pivot to when they show up later on. And we know that Reynad is in the, he's a fan of when you find a good item, you pivot to it. So instead of just picking your build on day 1 and day 2 and then playing that until day 11, you would find something on day 5 or 6 that makes you want to pivot, like a gold tier Armadillo, or like a enchanted item that I think should be more common, because I find that finding a random enchanted item is the most exciting part of the game. So we've kind of come full circle. It's a little bit rambly, but we've been talking for just shy of 25 minutes, and those are some of the biggest talking points that I wanted to share. there's some things that are OP, there's some things that are not strong enough, but I don't want to sit here and talk for like 3 or 4 hours. I wanted to go over the items that I think are most important for detailing my perception and my enjoyment, specifically, of the current patch on the Bazaar. And that's it. I guess if you agree, disagree, or emphatically disagree, yeah, let me know all of those things in the comment section of this YouTube video here. I would love to chat about it. You can always watch streaming on YouTube or on Twitch, twitch.tv/PierreThePig, or on this YouTube channel here when I'm streaming this game most of the time because I'm completely addicted to it. Whew, that's a lot of talking. I'll see you next time.